أعوذ بالله من الشيطان اللعين الرجيم. بسم الله الرحمن الرحيم. الحمد والثناء لله رب العالمين، ثم الصلاة والسلام على أشرف الأنبياء والمرسلين سيدنا ونبينا محمد وعلى أهل بيته الطيبين الطاهرين. اللهم صل على محمد. ولعنة الله على أعدائهم ومنكر فضائلهم من الآن إلى قيام يوم الدين. رب اشرح لي صدري ويسر لي أمري واحلل عقدة من لساني يفقه قولي. ثم أما بعد، فقد قال الله تعالى في محكم كتابه: بسم الله الرحمن الرحيم. يرفع الله الذين آمنوا منكم والذين أوتوا العلم درجات. صدق الله العلي العظيم. صلوا على محمد وآل محمد. صلوا على محمد وآل محمد. Respected elders, brothers and sisters, Assalamu alaikum wa rahmatullahi wa barakatuh. One of the most illustrious periods in the early history of Islam was the period of Imam Ja'far as-Sadiq alayhi salatu was-salam. The Holy Prophet was the one who established the Muslim community. And Imam Amir al-Mu'mineen alayhi salam after him, even though he was not immediately appointed as the Khalifa after the Prophet, even though they did not recognize him as the Khalifa, he still fulfilled his role as Khalifatullah in guiding the community. And the Imams after him did the same. So even though the general public, even though the people did not consider them to be the Khulafa, they still fulfilled their role in guiding the community to the best of their efforts, with the best of their efforts. What makes Imam Ja'far as-Sadiq alayhi salam so unique is that prior to Imam al-Baqir and Imam al-Sadiq, you see that the Imams were very limited in the students that they had. They were limited in the amount of knowledge they were able to impart because they were being pursued by the oppressive governments. They were surrounded by their enemies, and therefore you find that Imam Amir al-Mu'mineen, Imam Zain al-Abidin, Imam al-Hassan and Imam al-Hussein, they were able to mentor a handful of individuals. Imam Zain al-Abidin, through the purchasing and releasing of slaves, he was able to do a bit more. But you find that during the time of Imam al-Sadiq alayhi salam, you see that the Imam alayhi salam, because the Umayyads were declining in power and the Abbasids were trying to seize power, there was conflict between these two dynasties, between these two families. And therefore they became distracted, which allowed Imam al-Sadiq alayhi salam a golden opportunity. And the Imam alayhi salam, what he was able to do was he was able to mentor a generation of scholars. He was able to raise and train an entire generation of ulama. So much so that during the time of Imam al-Sadiq and shortly after Imam Ja'far al-Sadiq, there were thousands of ulama spread across the Islamic empire who were ascending manabir, they were ascending pulpits, and they would begin their dars by saying حدثني جعفر ibn Muhammad, that Ja'far as-Sadiq taught me, or I heard from Ja'far as-Sadiq, or I was informed by Ja'far as-Sadiq. So you see, what made the Imam alayhi salam so effective was he was able to combine immense knowledge with masterful teaching. You know, brothers and sisters, there are many scholars who have a great deal of knowledge, but they're not able to articulate that knowledge. They're not able to teach and impart that knowledge in a way that is understandable to the people. You have many great scholars, but they're not able to communicate at the level of the people. So they're not able to convey that knowledge. But Imam as-Sadiq alayhi salam, not only was he an ocean of knowledge, he was very skilled in the way that he imparted this knowledge to the people. He could masterfully teach someone who was a fisherman, who had no academic background. And the Imam was able to enlighten someone like that. And the Imam alayhi salam was also able to speak to people with philosophical backgrounds. He was able to speak at everyone according to their level. And what made the Imam alayhi salam so effective was that he made people feel comfortable. You know, sometimes when you meet certain scholars, they may be very intimidating. They may not be approachable. But Imam as-Sadiq alayhi salam, he always strived to create an atmosphere of comfortability. An atmosphere where no matter who you are, you feel comfortable talking to him. You feel comfortable asking him. And the Imam alayhi salam was so down to earth. And he was so humble. Even though he had such great knowledge, he was so comfortable, and he created safe spaces for people to come to him. So much so that even the most famous atheists, they used to come and they used to sit in the presence of Imam as-Sadiq alayhi salam. Now, the Imam alayhi salam, what made him so effective was that he also understood human psychology. You know, brothers and sisters, if you look at many of the sermons of the Ahlul Bayt, you find that the majority of the khutbahs of the Ahlul Bayt were relatively short. If you look at many of the sermons, if you read them from beginning to end, maybe they're 10 minutes long, 15 minutes long. If you go through Nahjul Balagha, you find that many of the sermons of the Imam, they were very short. If you read the Prophet's month of Ramadan sermon, it was maybe 15 minutes, maybe even less. The Prophet's final sermon in Hijjatul Wada was a relatively short sermon. Very rarely are you going to find a ma'soom who's going to sit and give a khutbah for 1 hour or an hour and a half. Why is that? Because the Imams alayhimus salam, they understand that human beings have a short attention span. You can't talk to people for an hour and be effective in imparting knowledge, because the majority of the people don't have that type of attention span. That's why most of the knowledge that we have from the Ahlul Bayt was transmitted to us in small bits. The Imam has a conversation with a person. Someone asks a question. And it was in many cases very informal. It was more of a conversation. So the Imams alayhimus salam, they were not known for giving lengthy sermons. And this is why, brothers and sisters, for those of you who are familiar with TED Talks, there is a reason why TED Talks don't exceed 15 to 18 minutes. They're very short. Why is that? You think that's a coincidence? There's a reason why they limit TED Talks and they don't ever exceed 20 minutes. The reason is because there's been a lot of research that shows that people, that human beings, they are able to absorb information for 20 minutes. If you go beyond that, they're not able to retain. They shut down. And therefore the Ahlul Bayt alayhimus salam 14 centuries ago, they understood this. And you even find that there's a precedence in the Quran for this, that we think that the way that we transmit Islamic knowledge is always sitting on the minbar for an hour and a half. That's not necessarily the case. If you look at the Quran, you find in the story of Musa and Khidr, Allah Azza wa Jal wanted Musa to learn from Khidr. So he goes and he meets Khidr. When he goes and he meets Khidr, what happens? Does Khidr say, okay, sit down and I have a khutbah to give you for 1 hour? He doesn't do that. What do? They walk with each other. There's a conversation that happens between the two. So in many cases, one of the reasons why our communities are not learning is because the knowledge is only one way. You come and you listen passively. And most of the time, you're not taking notes. You're just listening. It's not an interactive discussion. In the Quran, when Musa is learning from Khidr, what is it? It's an interactive discussion. And it's happening as they are moving. Which is a lesson for us, that we shouldn't confine the pursuit of knowledge to certain spaces. You can be a talib ilm wherever you go. Wherever you are, you can consider yourself in a divine classroom. So the Ahlul Bayt alayhimus salam, they understood this. And you find that the Imams alayhimus salam, whether they're in the masjid of the Prophet, or even if they're in the middle of the battle, during the battle of Jamal, someone comes to Imam Amir al-Mu'mineen, Ali ibn Abi Talib, salawatullahi alayhi, Allahumma salli. In the midst of the fighting, he asks Amir al-Mu'mineen, what is the meaning of Tawheed? Some of the companions of Amir al-Mu'mineen, they say to him that, what are you doing? We're in the middle of a battle. You're asking a question about Tawheed? The Imam alayhi salam says, no, leave him. This is precisely what we want from the enemy. If the enemy understood Tawheed, there would be no fighting between us. So the Imam alayhi salam, as he's fighting, he's teaching this man Tawheed. So you find that Imam al-Sadiq alayhi salam, he understood the nature of people. He understood that people have short attention spans. He understood that for people to learn, you have to make them comfortable. That you shouldn't set up barriers. You shouldn't make people feel foolish when they ask questions. People used to ask the Imams random questions about anything and everything. And the Imams never shunned people for that. They always encouraged people to ask. Furthermore, you find that Imam al-Sadiq alayhi salam in Medina, as the leader, sometimes we have to think of the Imams as the leaders of the community. Even if the members of the community do not recognize them as Imams, they are the leaders of the community. In Medina, the Imam alayhi salam, he had an education plan for the community. He had a public education plan, which means that he was delivering sermons to the public. He had public sermons, which means that if you came to the city of Medina and you were to enter the masjid of the Prophet, the Imam alayhi salam would be speaking to the crowds. He would be speaking to a large audience. So the Imam alayhi salam, he has a public education plan, but the Imam alayhi salam was not only delivering public sermons, he was also giving private lessons. So he had an education plan that was catered and custom designed for the gifted people in the community. Which means the Imam alayhi salam also gave his time privately to people who wanted to deepen their understanding of Islam. And this is another lesson for us to learn, brothers and sisters. As a community, we have to first ask ourselves, what is our education plan? Because this is one of the primary functions of a masjid. We're always talking about, many mosques you go to, they're talking about, okay, we need to renovate the roof. We need to get a security gate. We need to change the carpet. We need to buy more land. And these are important. No one is denying that these things need to be done. But how many of us speak about the education plan for the community this year? What do we need to teach the community this year? What is our 5-year education plan? Do we need to focus more on aqa'id? Or do we need to focus on fiqh? Do we need to focus on ethics? So we have to find out and determine the education level of the community. And the way that you do that is through surveys. You have to find out, assess the Islamic knowledge of your community. After you assess the Islamic knowledge of your community, you have to put forth a plan that we have certain goals that we have to achieve. The Imams they were strategic planners. If there are people who are advanced in the community, what are we offering them? Because many times you go to communities and you have certain individuals who are advanced, but they come to the lecture and it's always basics. We're not offering anything that is deeper for those who are more advanced in their Islamic knowledge. So you see Imam al-Sadiq, he had public sermons. He had educational goals for the wider community. But the Imam alayhi salam, he also was privately training Zurara. He was privately training Muhammad ibn Muslim. He was training scholars. Because the Imam recognized that we need the average Muslim to be educated. They have to have a certain level of ilm to fulfill their wajibat, to avoid the muharramat. This is the bare minimum. This is the type of knowledge that is obligatory for you to learn. There are certain levels of knowledge that it is wajib on you to know. The knowledge that allows you to fulfill your wajibat and avoid the muharramat, this is mandatory. But the Imam alayhi salam also understood that in addition to this basic level of knowledge, I need to train scholars. I need to train ulama. And that's why you find that the Imam alayhi salam, what did he do? He establishes an institution of scholars. Now, if I go back to the verse that I began with, from Surah Al-Mujadala, or Al-Mujadala, Surah 58, verse 11, what does Allah subhanahu wa ta'ala say? Because you may ask me, why is the Imam putting so much energy and effort in teaching? Why didn't the Imam say, I'll just teach them the bare minimum and I'll focus on my ibadah? I'll focus on doing extra prayers or reciting dua. Why is the Imam spending so many hours of his day teaching? It's because of the message of this ayah. What does Allah say? يَرْفَعِ اللَّهُ الَّذِينَ آمَنُوا مِنْكُمْ وَالَّذِينَ أُوتُوا الْعِلْمَ دَرَجَاتٍ. This is a very profound verse. Allah subhanahu wa ta'ala here, He says, يَرْفَعِ اللَّهُ الَّذِينَ آمَنُوا مِنْكُمْ. Every human being is on a journey towards Allah. The first thing that you have to do to elevate yourself is that you have to have iman. يَرْفَعِ اللَّهُ الَّذِينَ آمَنُوا مِنْكُمْ. Allah elevates those who believe from among you. So after you become Muslim, you make the shahada, you elevate yourself higher spiritually through iman, through ma'rifatullah. But after iman, after faith, there is only one thing that can allow you to elevate your spirituality, to go higher. And that is what? Ilm. After you are mu'min, the way that you go higher is through what? Through the acquisition of knowledge. وَالَّذِينَ أُوتُوا الْعِلْمَ دَرَجَاتٍ. So after you become mu'min, and even iman requires you to acquire knowledge, but to go higher and to continue going higher and higher, you need knowledge. So you find that the Imam alayhi salam understood that if I'm going to facilitate the spiritual growth of my community, I have to impart knowledge, that I have to produce scholars. So the Imam alayhi salam, what does he do? He focuses on educating the public, but he also focuses on mentoring and training scholars. Now, the Imam alayhi salam, the Imams of Ahlul Bayt, they say that, so you have Iman. Iman will take you up 1 degree. After Iman, to continue elevating, you have to increase your knowledge. Now, among the ulama themselves, what distinguishes one alim from another? There's a hadith from Imam al-Askari, alayhi salatu wassalam, Allahumma salli ala Muhammad wa ali Muhammad, where he speaks about how ulama are ranked on the Day of Judgment. So, if you have people of taqwa, someone who's muttaqi and he's mu'min, and then you have a muttaqi who is an alim. The alim is superior. Now what if you have ulama who have taqwa? How does Allah rank scholars on the Day of Judgment? The Imam alayhi salam, he says, through 2 factors, in 2 ways. Imam al-Askari alayhi salam, he says, on the Day of Judgment, how God will rank ulama. He says, Inna ulama shi'atina yuhsharuna fayukhlaw alayhim min khal'il karamat. That God will honor this pious scholars on the Day of Judgment. Based on what? They will be distinguished from each other based on what? One will be higher than the other. Based on what factors? 2 factors. على قدر كثرة علومهم, based on the extent of their knowledge. So those who have more ilm than others, they will be higher. But not only that, وجدهم في إرشاد عباد الله. That what sets certain scholars apart from others is how much knowledge they have and how much effort they put in spreading this knowledge to others. So you may have one individual who has higher knowledge than another, but Allah subhanahu wa ta'ala may elevate the other because he put more effort in spreading knowledge. Ahlul Bayt, what do they say? لِكُلِّ شَيْءٍ zakat. Everything has a zakat. وَزَكَاةُ الْعِلْمِ نَشْرُ. And the zakat of knowledge is to spread it. And each and every one of us, we might not be ulama, but we have knowledge. You have some knowledge. And you have to pay zakat on the knowledge that you have. So if you know Surah Al-Fatiha, if Allah has given you the tawfiq to learn a surah in the Quran, one of the ways that you pay your gratitude towards Allah is what? Teach someone who's young Surah Al-Fatiha. Pay the zakat on the knowledge that you have. So the Imam alayhi salam, what does he do? He trains scholars. Not only does he train scholars, he establishes an institution whereby he teaches the average Muslims to always refer to pious scholars. An institution that we call today marji'iyya. You know, brothers and sisters, when we think about maraja, when we think about scholars and the importance of referring to them, we always speak about marji'iyya in the context of the ghaiba. That because we're in the greater occultation, we're in zaman al-ghaiba, this is when you have to refer to Maraja. But you find that during the lifetimes of the Ahlul Bayt, they were instructing their followers to refer to ulama with taqwa. There's a hadith where there's a man by the name of Ali ibn al-Musayyab. He was a companion of Imam Ali ibn Musa al-Ridha, salawatullahi alayhi. Allahumma salli ala Muhammad wa ali Muhammad. And he was from Iran. The Imam alayhi salam, he was in Medina at the time. So Ali ibn al-Musayyab, he travels to Medina to meet Imam al-Ridha. And he says to the Imam, قلت للرضا شقتي بعيدة ولست أصل إليك في كل وقت. The Imam, he tells the Imam, يا ابن رسول الله, O Imam al-Ridha, I live far away from you, and I'm not able to reach you and to come to you and to ask you questions whenever I like. At that time, there was no, they didn't have emails or ways of reaching the Imams in a quick way. So he says, I live far away. You're in Medina, I'm in Iran. Who should I take my religion from? Now listen. The Imam alayhi salam could have said to him that you have to do ihtiyat, that you have to come yourself to Medina once a year and ask me questions, or you send someone to come to me and ask me questions. What does the Imam say? So Ali ibn al-Musayyab says, who should I take my religion from? The Imam says, من زكريا ابن آدم المأمون على الدين والدنيا. He says, refer to Zakaria ibn Adam, who is living in Qom, meaning he's close to you. Now here's a point that it's important that I make. Many people who criticize the institution of Marji'iyah, what's their common criticism? That they're not ma'soomeen. And why are you referring to Maraja? They're not ma'soomeen. What's the difference between him and me? I'm knowledgeable, I can read. Why do I have to refer to those who are not ma'soomeen? Zakaria ibn Adam, is he ma'soom? He's not ma'soom. But Imam al-Ridha alayhi salam is telling this man, refer to him, not just about any issue, take your deen from him. Now, is it possible for Zakaria ibn Adam to make a mistake? He's a human being. It's possible that he makes a mistake. But the Imam alayhi salam, he's instructing us to take our religion from a scholar, he's not ma'soom, but he's a scholar, and he has taqwa. And the Imam is trying to teach us that even if he makes a mistake, you have an excuse before Allah on the Day of Judgment. That you took your religion from someone who was an alim and someone who had taqwa. Now, you may say that, okay, if I'm far away from the Imam and I cannot access the Imam, I should refer to pious scholars. But if I'm living in the same city as the Imam, I should go to the Imam himself. Yes? So if I'm living in Medina, so Ali ibn al-Musayyab lives in Iran. What if I live in Medina? What if I am in the same city as the Imam? What should I do? There's a companion of Imam al-Sadiq, Aban ibn Taghlib. He was a student of Imam al-Sadiq. The Imam trained him. He was a scholar. What does the Imam say to him? He says, Ijlis fi Masjid al-Madinah. He tells Aban ibn Taghlib, sit in the Masjid of the Prophet. Wa aftin nas. And give fatwas. Give religious verdicts. فَإِنِّي أُحِبُّ أَن يُرَى فِي شِيعَةِ مِثْلُكَ. Because I love to see from among my Shias individuals like you. The Imam alayhi salam is telling him to go out, sit in the masjid, have people come and ask you questions and give them fatwa. You might say, but the Imam is in Medina. Why don't we go to Imam al-Sadiq? Why do we go to Aban ibn Taghlib? Why is the Imam doing this? Because the Imam wants to train the Shia to get into the habit of referring to scholars who have taqwa. Why? Because the Imams are preparing us for the ghaibah. If the Imams alayhimus salam instructed the Shias to only come to them, if Imam al-Sadiq says, only come to me because I'm ma'soom, don't refer to anyone else. And if Imam al-Kadhim did the same, and Imam al-Ridha did the same, up until Imam al-Askari, what would have happened when the 12th Imam went in ghaibah? We would go into shock as a community. But you see that the Imams, for generations, they were training us to refer to pious scholars. And therefore, we should not be individuals who say that, oh no, we have nothing to do with Qom or Najaf. We have nothing to do with Maraj. Don't turn away from an institution that was built by Imam al-Sadiq. How can you call yourself a lover of Ja'far al-Sadiq if you're trying to demolish an institution that was built by him? And therefore, it's important for us as communities to be connected to ulama who have taqwa. Don't say that, oh, we have nothing to do. We are living in the West. We have nothing to do with the ulama of Qom or Najaf. Don't be like that. The Imams of Ahlul Bayt, they always encourage their followers to take their guidance from scholars. Now, a common criticism is that some people, they have a bad experience with a marja. For example, they go to Qom or Najaf, and maybe they wanted to meet with a certain marja, and they felt that the marja didn't give them enough attention, and then they harbor a grudge against the marja, and then they come back and they become anti-maraja. Or sometimes you might hear that a certain wakil of a marja is corrupt, and therefore what do you start to do? They start to attack the entire institution. Why do we do this, brothers and sisters? You know, if you go to a doctor and a doctor makes a mistake, your physician makes a mistake, they misdiagnose you. Because at the end of the day, human beings make mistakes. What do you do? How do you respond to a doctor making a mistake? What do you do? Do you say that, okay, I'm not going to refer to any more doctors, I'm going to self-medicate? If you have an encounter with one doctor that you're unhappy with, do you say, forget about medicine? Or do you go and find another doctor? Meaning you don't completely turn away from the institution of medicine. So marji'iyya is not about an individual. It's about this institution that the Ahlul Bayt have built. And that's why one of the most destructive things in our communities, do you know what it is? Maraj are supposed to be the pillars of unity. But what happens? What causes division in a lot of communities? When we make the masjid about one specific marja. So for example, you go to a masjid, and this masjid, either the name of it is related to one specific marja, or the culture in the masjid is such that if you don't do taqleed of this marja, you're an outsider. And this is unhealthy. And this is very destructive to our communities. That we should respect all maraja. We should not create divisions within an already small community. We're already a minority. And sometimes what do? We create minorities within minorities. We create a cult mentality where we've created centers that are connected to certain maraja, and if you're not a follower of this specific marja, what do? You don't belong. Go to that center, because that center is connected to that marja. That's not what the Ahlul Bayt have taught. So we have to create this spirit of unity where we respect the institution of marji'iyya, but we don't make a masjid about promoting a specific marja. We have to be careful, because not everyone is going to do taqleed of your marja. And I've seen many communities, they fall apart because of this point. Because they want the masjid to be controlled by people who follow one specific marja. If there's someone who does taqleed of someone else, oh no, we have to be careful. You know, sometimes when you look at our condition as a community, believe me, Imam Sahib al-Zaman, he doesn't need enemies if he has supporters like us. He doesn't need enemies because we will give him enough grief because we're always fighting with each other. There's an interesting conversation that happens between Imam al-Sadiq alayhi salatu wassalam and one of his companions. There was a man who comes to Imam Ja'far al-Sadiq and he says to him, "Oh Imam, Allah subhanahu wa ta'ala," and this is a criticism of marj'iyah that even exists today. You know, all of these issues, they were brought up during the times of the Imam. There was a man who came to the Imam, قال رجل للإمام الصادق. He says to the Imam that, Ya ibn Rasulullah, Allah in the Quran, He blames the Jews and the Christians for doing taqleed of their scholars. So why are you now asking us to do taqleed of Muslim scholars? So for example, Allah in Surah At-Tawbah verse 31, He criticizes Bani Israel for blindly following scholars. اتخذوا أحبارهم ورهبانهم أربابا من دون الله. Allah says about Bani Israel that they took their monks, about Ahlul Kitab, they took their monks and their rabbis as gods other than Allah. But we know that Jews and Christians, they don't actually worship their monks and their rabbis. So what does Allah mean when they say they took them as gods other than God? In another ayah, Allah subhanahu wa ta'ala quotes the people of Jahannam. وَقَالُوا رَبُّنَا إِنَّا أَطَعْنَا سَادَتَنَا وَكُبَرَاءَنَا فَأَضَلُّونَ السَّبِيلَ. People in Jahannam will say that, "Oh our Lord, we followed our masters, we followed our leaders, and they misguided us." So he's asking the Imam, Ya ibn Rasulullah, Allah seems to condemn taqleed in the Quran. Why are you encouraging us to follow and do taqleed of ulama? The Imam alayhi salam, what does he say? He says, "Inna awam al-Yahud قد عرفوا علماءهم بالكذب الصراح." The Imam alayhi salam, he says there's a difference. Bani Israel, Ahlul Kitab, they were blindly following their scholars while they knew that they were corrupt. Imam is saying that I'm not telling you to follow scholars, I'm telling you to follow pious scholars. You know, during the time, in Bani Israel, especially during the time of Isa and a little bit before, many of the rabbis, you know what they used to do? Many of them were corrupt. They used to get bribed. And this is one of the great challenges that Isa ibn Maryam faced. So you have these religious clerics. So there's a man from Bani Israel, he's a businessman. And let's say he's a shark lender. And he knows that in the Sharia of Musa, you cannot collect interest. So what does he do? He goes to a rabbi, one of the scholars of Bani Israel. He says, "Listen, give me a good fatwa, change the ruling, and I'll pay you." And many of them, they did. They would alter God's laws because they were being paid. So Imam As-Sadiq, he says, I'm not telling you to follow any scholars. I'm telling you to follow pious scholars. And then the Imam describes what type of scholars that we should follow as individuals and as communities. أما من كان من الفقهاء صائنا لنفسه. Follow a faqih who protects his soul, who is more concerned about protecting his soul than anything. حافظا لدينه, who preserves his faith. مخالفا لهواه, who goes against his desires. Who goes against his desires. You know, brothers and sisters, we should really be proud that we have pious ulama. Many of you, you know Sayyid al-Sistani in Najaf, just to give you an example of one of our pious maraja. You know, he doesn't even own the house that he lives in. For those of you, for the ones who are Hawza students, even the clothes that he's wearing, the saya that he's wearing, it is the cheapest quality. A lot of the garments that he's wearing, he's had them for decades. مخالفا لهواه مطيعا لأمر مولاه. They are obedient to God. You know, scholars of other schools, of other traditions, many of them are appointed by the government. They are puppets of the governments. They are obedient to the governments. Our maraja, our ulama, for 14 centuries, they've been independent. They're not connected to any institution. فَعَلَى الْعَوَامِ أَن يُقَلِّدُوا. The Imam says the people are permitted to follow them. And then the Imam alayhi salam, what does he say? And this is a part of the tradition that many people, they don't mention. They stop here. فَعَلَى الْعَوَامِ أَن يُقَلِّدُوا. And they stop. The Imam says, وَذَلِكَ لَا يَكُونُ إِلَّا بَعْضَ فُقَهَاءِ الشِّيعَةِ. The Imam says, and this applies not to all of the Shia fuqaha, but some of them. Which means the Imam is foreshadowing that it's possible for someone to wear the imamah, to be very knowledgeable, but they don't have taqwa. It's possible. It happened with previous generations. So you have to follow pious scholars. And many people ask, Shaykh, do I have to do taqleed? Is it wajib on me to do taqleed? The answer is no. No. Yes, you can go become an alim yourself. You don't want to do taqleed? You don't want to follow a scholar? Go and become a scholar yourself. So taqleed is actually a rahmah on us. Ahlul Bayt could have said that each and every one of our Shia has to become a faqih. You have to, wajib. But the Imams, they didn't impose that burden on us. The Imam said you can pursue your passions and work in whatever field that you want, but make sure you take your deen from pious scholars. And one final point. And this is a lesson for us as communities. There's a verse in the Quran, وَمَا كَانَ الْمُؤْمِنُونَ لِيَنْفِرُوا كَافَّةً. You know, during the time of the Prophet, when the Muslims were being attacked, they would all go for jihad. Yes? There were certain groups of people that were exempt from jihad. Women, children, the elderly, the sick. Among those who were exempt from jihad were who? Students of knowledge, people who were studying to become ulama. وَمَا كَانَ الْمُؤْمِنُونَ لِيَنْفِرُوا كَافَّةً فَلَوْلَا نَفَرَ مِنْ كُلِّ فِرْقَةٍ مِّنْهُمْ طَائِفَةٌ لِيَتَفَقَّهُ فِي الدِّينِ. Allah in the Quran, He says there should, of every community, there should be a group that goes and acquires tafaqquh, that you become mutafaqqih. Tafaqquh doesn't just mean fiqh, it means that you have a deep understanding of religion. And this is something that we have to learn as communities. We invest in properties, we invest in buying land, but we need to invest in what? People. We need to invest in human capital. Allah Azza wa Jal, what does He say? He says there should be a group from among you who goes and develops a deep understanding of religion. وَلِيُنذِرُوا قَوْمَهُمْ إِذَا رَجَعُوا إِلَيْهِمْ لَعَلَّهُمْ يَحْذَرُونَ. And they come back to their community and they warn and they teach. Almost every community that I've been to, they have the same problem. Shaykh, we need a resident alim. Shaykh, we need a resident alim. You know why you don't have a resident alim? Because you didn't plan for it. Because we build mosques and we don't think about who's going to be the alim, who's going to be the scholar. It's like you build a hospital and there's no doctor. You build a hospital and there's no doctor. And how do we try to resolve the problem? Okay, we go and we bring someone from overseas. In the past, we had to do that because we didn't have any options, because all of the ulama were from overseas. But now, moving forward, do you know what we have to do? We cannot import ulama. We have to export, meaning we have people in our community, people who are interested in becoming scholars. What do? Part of your annual budget should be to sponsor youth who want to be scholars. So they become mutafaqih fi deen, and then they come back to serve the community. That's how you build a community. You invest in human capital. And this is what the Quran teaches us. And that these scholars should be from among you, because they will understand the challenges of the community. When Allah sends a prophet, does He send a prophet from a foreign country? Or does He choose a prophet and a spiritual teacher from among the people? Allah chooses a prophet from among the people. And therefore we need to invest in youth who will become scholars from among our communities, so they can take our communities forward. We ask Allah Azza wa Jal to bless us and guide us and illuminate our hearts with the teachings of Muhammad wa Ali Muhammad. Brothers and sisters, many of you know Shaykh Muhammad al-Hilli. He's been to your center many times. Unfortunately today, he received news that his son, his 5-year-old son, I believe, his name is Hadi, was diagnosed with leukemia. So he's now receiving chemotherapy. Imagine a 5-year-old. Imagine Shaykh al-Hilli, who's away from his family lecturing, receiving this news. So let us recite Amman Yujibu al-Muftar for his family and for all of those who are in need of our prayers. Bismillahir Rahmanir Rahim. Amman Yujibu أمن يجيب أمن يجيب أمن يجيب أمن يجيب المضطر إذا دعاه ويكشف السوء. We ask Allah Azza wa Jal بحق محمد وآل Muhammad to grant him a speedy recovery, and we ask Allah Azza wa Jal to grant shifa to all those who are sick. وآخر